Kirk Cousins, nuestro primo. So Kirk Cousins had the Achilles tear, and but then he signs a $180 million contract, which makes people think, hey, you know what? Could it be, they're feeling good about it, but then they go and draft his replacement. So had his surgery he was injured at the end of October during a 24-10 victory at Green Bay. But I mean, it's really first off, at this point in his recovery, how does he look going into training camp at the end of July, which will be about 9 months after the injury happened?
Well, he was on Dancing with the Stars, so we know that Achilles is probably holding up pretty well. Here's what you worry about with this guy who's at this point, mid-30s. He is probably going to continue to have some tightness in the calf, tightness in the Achilles. It is a little bit more it's different than than Aaron Rodgers, who we'll talk about as well. This is Kirk's plant foot, right? Which is a little different than not. That's something you have to consider. There's a lot more stress going through that joint, a lot more stress going through that Achilles tendon. So is there a higher likelihood of having a secondary injury, right? Like an ACL or another Achilles? There's no data to support that. Is it possible because he's 35? He's working on rehabbing, right? His workloads have been up and down. His body's been up and down. He's getting a little bit older. It's probably going to be tougher for him to recover. Now, Kirk's been pretty tough. If you watch the Netflix doc, there's one thing that I did walk away from that is obviously what happens, but watching it is really interesting. Kirk Cousins is a tough MFer, right? And the only thing you want him, you want him to survive the season. But this is a little different than surviving a ribs injury or a shoulder injury, right? Like if that Achilles is going to hold up, we need to see it hold up the whole season, and we need to see it hold up without any further calf strains. And, the ability of him to move around in the pocket, maneuver the pocket, I know it was already limited, but definitely don't expect him to be able to scramble around or move around the way that he did when he was a little younger, right? Back in his Washington days. So overall, I think this is still, arrows up for Drake London, arrows up for Bijan, arrows up maybe for Kyle Pitts. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll talk about him in a future episode.
I'm sure we will. So yeah, that's where I'm at with Kirk Cousins.
And you know what? They say follow the money. So $180 million, that's a lot of confidence in an organization. But they just drafted his replacement, like we talked about at the beginning, and that just eso me hace cosa a little bit. They talk about the fact that the first 2 years have the most guaranteed money in it, and that apparently they can walk away from the contract after 2 years, they being the Falcons. At that point, could they be looking to move on? But really, I mean, from an injury recovery standpoint, is the big contract really telling you that they have full faith that he's going to be ready when bullets start flying in September?
Well, I think he will be ready, right? But again, there's always a difference between returning to play, returning to perform. We say it all the time. I think it's interesting, right? If you want to listen to our breakdown on Michael Penix, obviously go back to the previous episode, because it's interesting that if they were worried about an injury for Kirk Cousins, they went out and got a guy who plausibly you could be worried about further injury, although I'm not too concerned in Michael Penix. But he'll be ready to go. The question is, will he hold up? I think he can, but again, there's always a little bit of risk involved with the 35-year-old quarterback who's coming off an Achilles tear.